Next up, we'll implement Mo with imperative record update. So as a reminder of what we want, here's our JavaScript syntax again. We create a record O, and then we use an imperative update to change the value of the field x to be 5. So later on, we do a get o.x, we get back 5 instead of the original value 1. So to do this kind of an update, we're going to need state. And the model that we use is to allocate state for every field inside of a record, so that when we go to do an update, we'll have some state that we can overwrite. Here's the Mo syntax that we'll use for a mutable update. So here we make a record named R1, and then we use this colon equal to set the value of the A field. Then when we read R1.A, we get back 5 instead of the original value. Again, to implement this, we need to allocate state for every one of the record fields. And then when we do a set or an update, we need to modify that state instead of building a new record. We can use boxes to implement the state. So we'll be using Shplait boxes to implement mutable records for Mo. The first step is to modify our value type. So inside rec_v, we now need a list of boxes of values instead of a list of values. Then inside the interpreter, here's our old case for record E. So we were creating a record value by mapping the interpreter across all the V's. What we need to do instead is use map to create a list of boxes. So to do that, we use Splait's box function to wrap the value that we get from interpret. Next up is our get expressions. So the old case for get had relied on this helper function find, and find would go through a list of symbol and list of values and give us back a value. Now we have a list of boxes of values, so we need a new helper function. We'll give the new helper the same name as the old helper, but we need to change its type. So now find is taking in a list of boxes of values and returning a box. In the interpreter, we need to return a value, so we call unbox after we call find, and then we're all set with the get case. Now for a set expression, we need to find the box that corresponds to a field and then update it. It turns out we can use the same find function that we just wrote in order to do the lookup. Once we found that value inside of the record, we can use Splait's setBox to do our mutable update. So we call setBox on the box that we get back from find, and the new value that we use is the result of calling interp on v. At this point, we're almost done, but our interpreter needs to return a value, and setBox does not return a value. So the value that we'll choose to return is the value of calling interp on v. We first use a let to give a name to the result of interpreting v. Then we call setBox, just like on the previous slide, and then finally return f, which is our value for v. And with that, we're all done with our mutable update. One final comment, though. We've been cheating in a sense because we're using Shplait boxes to implement the interesting part of imperative update. We could use an explicit store instead, but I want to point out that when you do that, you're going to need to rearrange some code. So for example, here's our case that we had for record expressions, and we were using map to call the interpreter on every value inside the list BS. This won't work if we have a store. So what we'll need to do is thread through that store into each call to interp. Map won't do that communication for us. So instead of map, we need to write our own helper function, which will carry around a store as it interprets each of the V's.